All right, welcome to the final video. Today we're going to be talking about single case design effect sizes and how we calculate those. So first off, huge shout out to Meg, who really was the one who figured out how to use this software, how to use this program. She even went ahead and made up a handout that I'm going to share with y'all, but I'm going to walk you through how to calculate an effect size for single case design that we're going to be able to use when we are analyzing all the data together. Because otherwise, a lot of meta-analyses will come up with one effect size for single group studies and then one effect size for group design studies. But the strategy we're going to use today will allow us to lump everything together. So the first thing we're going to do is I just pulled out one of the first single case design studies that I know we have. This one is by Emily Buke, and it's number 127. And your first step is going to be to find the graph, and you're going to want to take a screenshot of it. So for Macs, it's Command-Shift-4. I'm not entirely sure what it is for other computers, for Windows or things like that. So I just have a screenshot of that. So I'm going to go ahead and miniaturize this. We don't need the study anymore. And this is the handout that Meg made for us because she's awesome. And I will definitely share this in the folder. So you can see here the first thing that we need to check is does the study include multiple baseline or a reversal? So multiple baseline, when we looked at the study, it had those 3 steps. We were looking at 3 participants in a sort of staggered time. And then a reversal, you don't see those as often in math, but it would be they receive a baseline, then they receive the treatment, and then the treatment gets taken away, so they're back to a baseline or a control position, and then they get the treatment again, so it's kind of flip-flopping. Like I said, that's more of a behavioral thing, not really a math thing. So most of our studies are going to be multiple baseline. The other thing is there must be a minimum of 3 participants for each effect size. So remember when we were calculating effect size for group designs, we had one for every single measure. The same thing is going to take place when we're looking at effect size for single case design. The nice thing is for most single case designs, they just have one real measure that they're using, so they only have the one graph. So we really just typically only have to do one each. So next what we're going to do is we're going to extract the data from the screenshot from the graphs we just took, and we're going to put it into an Excel document. And so the cool thing is this web plot digitizer does that for us and does it in a very precise way. So I'm going to follow Meg's directions. I will click launch now. I will load the image, and this one was just saved on the desktop. Most recent thing added. And we are going to be looking at a 2D XY plot. Now the first thing here is we need to label the X and Y axes. So the first spot, the first X spot, I usually like to put here at the origin. So in a minute I'm going to show you how we can align our X axis and our Y axis. So usually I like to do the origin and then one far off X spot, and then for my Y's I do again the origin, and then I do usually the maximum Y value they have. So let me show you what that looks like. So first off, for this graph, because she separates the 3 students, we're going to have to do this process 3 separate times, and that's okay. But let me go ahead and show you what I mean by setting up the x-axis. So I'm going to line up here. I'm going to click x-axis. You can see it's down here on the big graph. It's also, when I move, it's going to move with me. But this graphic up here really helps us form a very, very precise location of where the first X point is. So I'm going to put it at 0, 0. And then I'm going to go way over here and find a far, far X value. Most graphs, the tick marks are the session numbers. For whatever reason, in this graph, they plot the values in between the tick marks. So this right here is the 25th session. And that's going to be a problem. You're going to see when we start extracting the data. I don't know why they did it. I don't know. So those are my X values, and now I'm going to plot my Y values. I'm going to plot Y1, I get on the origin, and then here, to make sure it's lined up, I am moving my arrows just so the Y is exactly lined up. You can see there's no real line for me to align my Y values, so I'm just using my arrows. If you wanted this to go faster, you can hit Shift and the arrow key up, but then it goes really fast, and I don't quite trust myself with that kind of speed. Okay, so now it's lined up, and I have it, you can see, fairly well centered in the middle of the 100 value. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click there, and that didn't work. So there, oh, my bad. You know what it did is it moved the Y1 up there, and I want the Y1 to be way down below. So let me redo that real fast. Sorry about that, y'all. So let's do Y1 is down here. We're going to move it and just move it down. Okay, so now you can see it is lined up. Y1 is lined up on the origin. I will go ahead and click there, and then I'm going to click on the Y2. You can see whenever it's lit up in green, that's when you're moving it. So I will scroll it back up and sort of just cut this part out of the video. Okay, so now I have it at Y2 right in the middle of the 100. So now I have everything set up the way that I'd like it. I have Y1 at the origin, X1 at the origin, X2 at one of the furthest X place values, and then my Y2 up really high on one of my top Y values. So now I will click complete, and what they're going to ask you here is to input the value of your points. So like I said, my first X1 was at 0, 0, the origin, and then my second point, remember I tried to line it up pretty well with the 25, the 25th session, so I'm going to give it a value of 25. My Y-axis, again, my Y1 was on the origin, so it was 0, 0. And then my second point, I tried really hard to line it up pretty well with that 100. And then I'm going to assume the axes are perfectly aligned, and hopefully that's true. And then we're going to hit OK. Okay, so we are working down here with Evan's session. Now what we have to do is we have to manually add every point on the graph. So you will click A, add point, and then you're going to try and find the very center of this point. You can move it around a little bit with your keys, your arrow keys, but your goal is really to find the very smack dab middle of that point. And the reason why is in a minute when we extract this data, we're going to, the more precise you are, the more accurate your information is. So I'm going to keep going through, and you can see I just line up, I'm using the graphic on the top, just sort of lining up the center of each of these dots. And we will come back once I have all of these done, because you don't really need to see me centering each one of these. Okay, so now you can see, if we look down at my graph, I've put a red point on each of the data points in the graph for Evan's graph. If they had all three of these graphs on the same y-axis, then you could plot all of the graphs, because in this case, they've separated the graphs into 3 chunks, so 0 to 100, 0 to 100, 0 to 100. Since they separated it into 3 pieces, we're going to have to do it 3 times pretty much. So now that I have added all my data points and they're pretty well centered, I'm going to go ahead and hit View Data. Now there's a couple things that you're going to see here. First off, there are very, very long numbers. We don't need it to be that long. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it to 3 digits. and we'll go ahead and set it to precise, I believe, and then go ahead and click format, and then it goes to 3 digits pretty much per number. So the other thing that I wanted to point out is earlier when I was talking about the more precise you can be with the center of your point, the cleaner your data will be. For this study, I know that the probes, you could either get a 0, a 20, a 40, a 60, an 80, or a 100. And you can see, because I wasn't 100% precise, these numbers are slightly off. I'm not worried though, because it's not going to impact the effect size a great deal. At the end, it will sort of average out. But you can see this should be 40, this should be 100, this should be 60, and that's okay. That's just one of the reasons why we want to be as close as possible to the center. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and it's a problem with this graph, I believe, because I've done it a couple times and I haven't been able to fix this, but you can see this is the session number. There is no half a session. This is supposed to be session 1. This is supposed to be session 2, session 3, session 4, session 5, session 7, and so on. So you can see it lines up with these data points down here. I think it's the graph is really wonky, because you can see once we get close to 25, 26, then it's much more precise and accurate. But for whatever reason, at the beginning, it has these really weird values. So we don't have to worry about that right now, because the next program that we're going to talk about, we're going to use rounds that for us. But I just wanted you to see that, because it definitely freaked me out when I first saw it. So you can see if everything looks okay and nothing looks super scary, then you can go ahead and download the CSV file. And then what we're going to do is when you pull it up, there's a couple things that I want you to do. So first thing is I would like you to save this wherever you're going to save it as, I'll save this on my desktop. Let me save as the author's name. So this is just going to go into downloads because I already have one of these ready to go. As the author's name, and then the study number. And then for this one, because it is just one student, I'm going to call it Evan. And we're going to save that. Okay, once you have it saved, the next thing that I want you to do, and this will make sense in just a few minutes, is I want you to add 2 columns to the left and 1 column on the top. And this is going to be, we're going to label it case, we're going to label this phase, we're going to label this session, and we're going to label this outcome. And then for case, this is going to be the student's name is Evan. And these are all Evan's data. And then for phase, we're looking at which of these were baseline and which of these were treatment. So you can tell if it's baseline or treatment. Usually there's a big line dividing them. Anything on the left of the line is going to be baseline. So I can see the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 data points are baseline. And if we're talking baseline, we're just going to put a 0. Did I say 7? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, so it looks like up to session 10 is baseline. And then the rest we're going to call treatment. Not 11. And treatment we're going to put as a 1. And this, like I said, this will make sense when we add this data to the next program that we're going to use. It just needs things labeled. So case is going to be the student. Phase is either going to be baseline, which is 0, or treatment, which is 1. Session is the data that it spat out for us, looking at the sessions down here. And the outcome is the Y variable. And again, it sort of spat that out for us. So I'm going to go ahead, I saved this, and I'm going to miniaturize it for now. And then, because we have 3 different students, now we're going to do it again with Drew and again with Cora. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these points. And it's much easier to delete than it is to add. I'm not sure what that says about me or about the program. And then what we're going to do is then we have to realign the y-axis, because remember right now the y-axis is just for Evans down here. So we need to go up here to the axes, X, Y, and we're going to tweak the calibration. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on Y1, it's green, so it's good to go. And I'm going to use my arrows, and I am going to move it up. It's like I really have to click on it. Okay. Come on, Y1. We're going to move it up, and in this case, I'm going to use my Shift and arrow key, and you can see how very much faster it moves. I'm going to slow it back down to get the new origin of this graph. And then for Y2, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to move it up to the new top of the new graph, up by that 100. And I want it to line up as well as I can in the middle of that 100. So now I have Y1 and Y2 readjusted for this graph. And for the sake of my x-axis, it's fine because hopefully the axes line up here. So they're supposed to. So I have faith that they do. So I don't touch the x. I just move the y. So it's now set to Drew's data, and then I hit complete. It is still, my x is still 0 and 25. My y-axis I moved to 0 and 100. I'm going to hit OK. And then I would go through and I would add the points, you know, making sure they're perfectly in the middle. I'm just throwing them on there right now for you guys to see. I would add the points, make sure they're way nicer than what I'm doing here. And then you would hit View Data when you're all done. You would download that CSV file, and then you would save it as Drew's data, and then you would do the same thing with Cora's data. Now, for the sake of time, I went ahead and did all that for us. I feel like Martha Stewart right now, because I'm going to go ahead and pull out a completed CSV file where I have all of Cora's data, I have all of Drew's data, and I have all of Evan's data already set up. And you can see that I went in and the phases line up with their baseline data. The sessions and outcomes are the data that the program pulled for us. And all I did was I put everything onto one new Excel sheet, and I saved it again as the study number, which I apologize, I think the last one I said was 126, and the study number is 127, so I apologize for that. But do the real study ID number, the author's name, and then you can put data, just so we know this is the sort of pre-data that we're going to use for the next program. So now that I have this, I have it saved and ready to go. You're going to want to save it as a CSV file. That'll make your life easier in whatever folder you saved your last data. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my handy dandy handout that Megan made for us. And I'm going to click on the effect size calculator made by this professor. He was at UT. His name is James Putiowski. He's our good friend James, and he made this calculator for us, which is really awesome. And what we're going to do is we're going to input the Excel file that we just made, the CSV file we just made, and it's going to run it and calculate an effect size, which is super cool. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to load the data. And if you want to play with this, they make it super easy to use this program. But if you want to play, you can always use an example and sort of click on the different buttons to see what happens. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to upload the file. Let's see. This is going to be in here, trainings, coding. You can see I have multiple versions because I tried it with different file types, but I would stick with CSV files. You're going to choose that. And then this is the reason why we labeled those things as case, phase, session, and outcome, because then that makes it really easy for the program to read it in. So the one thing I do need to change is this is a multiple baseline. So we have a multiple baseline study design. Our case identifier, remember we called it case, that was the student's name. The phase, we called it phase because that was the baseline versus the treatment. Session, we called session. Remember I said we didn't have to worry about if the session was a weird decimal because it has this already preset. It rounds it for us. And then the outcome variable, it already comes preset as the outcome. Baseline 0, treatment 1. This is so handy dandy. And then we're going to inspect the data to make sure it looks right. So you can go back and check the previous graphs here and just sort of eyeball it and make sure it looks like the graphs over here, and it looks good. It's a little more stretched out, but that's okay. And then here's the data, and we want to go through, and you would want to make sure that this lines up with the data that you have in your Excel file, and it looks good. I went ahead and previewed it. I don't see any typos. And then what we'll do is we'll go to the model. And you can see here, go ahead and use the default specifications. We're going to use and what that means is up here where it says the restricted maximum likelihood model. We're going to keep it there. We're going to assume no trend. So we're good to go there. The intervention is going to be fixed effect, and it's set at level. And you can see here, we'll click on model estimates. If you're interested at all in what the R looks like, if you wanted to run this in the program, you can look there. Otherwise, we're good to go. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to click on the effect size. And this is a lot of beautiful information. But this right here is our effect size, right here, this information. The rest of it is super interesting stuff if you want to read more about it. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to download this file, and then I'm going to resave it as the study name, the study ID, and then it'll come up as effect size estimate. And then the last thing that I want to show you all is when you are uploading all of these documents, you're going to have in the single case effect size folder, let me go back one. In the single effect size, there you go, single case effect size, what you're going to do is for every study, you're going to make a new folder. And your folder is going to have the name of the study and the study ID number. So this should just say Buke 127. And then within that folder, there's a lot of stuff for you to upload, but it's just the stuff that you've been using throughout. So you're going to have, if you had multiple students, you're going to have each student CSV file uploaded. You're going to have the CSV file where everything is aggregated. So this is all my data. And then you're going to upload that final effect size. And it looks like that. It's two tiny little columns, but it's beautiful. And there's the data for us all ready to go. So yeah, it's the stuff you've been using throughout, but we're just going to keep everything together. And that's all you need to know to calculate the effect size of a single case design study. So it's kind of tedious, but I don't think there's anything that's too complicated. You just kind of have to take your time centering those data points when you're using that original data extraction program. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free always to reach out. Otherwise, congratulations, you have finished all the videos. You have now leveled up, boop, 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 and give yourself a gold star because you're done with them. Nice job.